Welcome back to another interview today. Today we have an extremely special guest. It is my absolute pleasure to have Dr. Rob McNeilly with us today. Now, if you have not heard of Rob McNeilly or have not heard of Milton Erickson, Rob had the fortunate enough experience to spend quite a bit of time with Milton Erickson, who we all know and are big fans of when it comes to hypnotherapy and coaching. So, Rob, firstly, thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you for giving us your time today.
Thanks for inviting me, Scott. It's always a pleasure to share what I learned from Erickson with anyone who's interested to.
Excellent. So you've got a lot of fans we're going to be sharing this with. So Rob, let's start from scratch. I've got a bit of information about you from what I understand. You had a medical practice in Melbourne for about 10 years and you got into hypnosis. Did you get into hypnosis to help your patients or was it for something different entirely? How did you get into that?
Well, it started with a personal crisis. My first marriage, I was in a crisis with my first marriage.
Okay.
And I went to see Ainsley Mears as a patient.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a lot of help from that. So I was curious about what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about atavistic regression and meditation, but
Mm-hmm.
he'd written a book about hypnotherapy, medical hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started to explore that, and I did a 2-year training program while I was still in general practice in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And basically what I learned in that program was that hypnosis is dangerous and you've got to be very careful of it.
Really? Wow. Now we know better things, right?
Well, but one of the results of that was that I saw a film of Erickson working when I was in the international conference.
Mm-hmm.
Herb Lustig's marvelous film, The Artistry of Milton H. Erickson.
Okay.
And it was love at first sight. I just saw that man. He's like a human being talking to another human.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I got interested in hypnosis through my personal benefit, and I started to use hypnosis in my medical practice.
Mm-hmm.
The last 9 deliveries that I delivered a lot of babies.
Mm-hmm.
The last 9 were hypnotic deliveries, and they were very nice, very successful, very useful.
Mm-hmm. How did your patients, what did they think? Do you obviously let them know you're going to use some hypnotic techniques? How did they come across with that? Were they a bit skeptical about it or?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you say someone's about to have a baby, they're about to go into labor, and you say, would you like to have hypnosis or would you like to have the pain?
Let me think. So obviously they're agreeing to this.
Usually people I found that were pretty willing to at least explore the possibility of something useful happening.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that came with a lot of trust from you as a medical professional as well?
I think that was a help. There was already a relationship in general practice with these people, so they trusted me. So that when I suggested, what about this, then it wasn't starting from scratch.
Sure. So when you were helping your patients with hypnosis, what happened next? When did when you were a doctor delivering the babies and in general practice and hypnosis, did you have the thoughts that, you know what, I want to get into full-time just using hypnosis and get away from the medical practice, or was it intertwined somehow?
Well, it started by being intertwined, and then gradually I started to think, this is what I want to do full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did in 1980. It was funny. I said to Erickson, I was thinking of leaving general practice and starting up a hypnotherapy practice.
Mm-hmm.
He looked at me very seriously and said, no, don't do that. Just stay in general practice and maybe a few years down the track, maybe you can do something. That was in March. 4th of July that year, I left general practice. So I went totally counter to what he recommended. It's typical of the man that if you had a question, he would give you a definite answer.
Yeah.
Not that he was right, but he gave you a definite answer so you can have a significant response to it.
Yeah. So how did you first get in contact with Milton Erickson? Was it obviously over phone call first?
Well, I saw that film that Herb Lustig made, The Artistry of Milton H. Erickson. I saw that. And like I say, I took to it. It was like a decent human being having a conversation There was none of this kind of power tactics like I'm the expert, I'm going to fix you.
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted to learn from him. So I should have written a letter, but I didn't. I was impatient. I rang him up. And I said, I'd like to learn with you. And he said, come on over.
So you actually got to speak to him first off?
But I thought I'd be speaking to a secretary or something. But no, he picked up the phone. That's the kind of person.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. It was well.
And his response was just come on over and come and learn. So he was having a lot of people probably getting in contact with him, wanting to learn with him, correct?
Well, this was in 1980, and he wasn't really that popular there by that stage.
Okay.
So I spent a couple of weeks with him did I say 1980? No, it was 1977, sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I was over there for 2 weeks, and a lot of those 2 weeks, it was just me and him.
Wow.
Sometimes there was another person there, sometimes a couple of other people. But by the time I went back there the following year in 78, he had a teaching seminar going on where people were coming from all over the place, all over the world, really, to spend some time with him.
So your first time with him, what was that like? You know, I've read stories that just being around him was a bizarre experience, and you know, people dropping into trance very quickly from just sitting around him. Was that the case with you as well?
Well, it's a rather funny story. I arrived on the Monday, and he said, "What do you want to learn?" I said, "Well, what I've learned about hypnosis for pain management doesn't make sense to me." And there was another person there who'd been there with Erickson the previous day, Lee Poulos, down from Canada. And Erickson said to Lee, would you show Robert what happened yesterday? Now, given that I'd learned hypnosis is you look at that spot, you relax your body, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So anyhow, Lee said, yeah, I'll be glad to. So Lee said, I was sitting in the same chair, listening to what you said. And I thought,
and off he went.
what is this? Where's the induction? What? But actually, Erickson had asked Lee to show me what happened. So he actually showed me what happened. In order to do that, he had to re-experience it.
Right. So like a revivification type thing.
Like just remembering. And anyhow, he kept on talking, and he's told some stories about this, that, and the other thing. And I started to go into trance, but he didn't say close your eyes or go into trance. So I was used to being told what to do. And I was struggling. And my elbows were digging into my knee.
Wow.
My head was starting to fall like I was in agony. And I felt at any moment I could fall on the floor. I was in a lot of discomfort. Actually, I learned a lot about pain management.
Yeah.
And anyhow, I was there waiting for him to give me instructions. And he told this story about blah, blah, it doesn't matter what. But here I was sitting there with a pair of jeans. You know, this was a long time ago. I was slim and young. And the jeans were pretty tight. And he said that this painting, there were two large rocks right out in front. And I can't tell you how embarrassed I was. He was talking about my tight trousers. And I felt so embarrassed that the only place to go was to close my eyes and go into trance.
Wow.
That's the most unusual invitation into hypnosis I've ever come.
So you went over there confused about hypnosis and pain management, and you meet someone who's known to confuse people in the way he even talks and the stories he tells. What was happening in your head? Were you trying to analytically try and work out what he was doing, or had that gone by then?
That had gone. And after 2.5 hours of him telling stories and me learning to be in that discomfort and play with it, the session finished, and I said, well, it was very interesting to hear what you had to say, but I'm not quite sure what you were getting at. Now, I'd had the 2.5 hour version. So then he gave me the short version. He said,
Right.
what we experience depends on how we direct our attention.
Wow. That's
Well,
profound.
what a beautiful summary.
Yeah.
What we experience depends on not where, but how we direct attention. And that really was one of the core principles that I learned from him. Became part of my therapeutic approach and part of my teaching.
Was that his normal approach, to sort of give an indirect answer, direct answer, never really answer things directly?
No, he didn't have a typical approach. He didn't have a typical approach. Jay Haley said that Erickson was impossible to interview,
Right.
because whenever you asked him a question, he would give you an answer that he thought would be helpful to you.
Wow.
So he was always doing therapy.
Right.
Yeah.
So after that experience, what happened next? I mean, for lack of better words, he taught you something, but didn't teach you something at the same time. It wasn't like a strict technique or something like that.
He didn't teach me anything. What he did was he provided an opportunity for me to learn. And that is a crucial difference. I don't know whether you've seen that cartoon where a boy says to his friend, I taught my dog to whistle. The other boy's listening to the dog and he says, I can't hear him whistling. And the first boy says, I didn't say he can whistle. I said I taught him to whistle. I didn't say he learned to whistle.
Yeah. I love that.
Erickson put a huge emphasis on learning. He said all problems are learned limitations.
Wow.
So a problem is a problem not because there's something wrong with us that needs fixing, because of something that we've learned and we've got trapped and imprisoned in that learning that keeps on and becomes a problem. So if we've learned it, we can unlearn it and we can learn something new, something different, something preferable.
Wow.
Yeah, it is.
All from that very first time of meeting him. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was incredible. Still is.
Yeah.
I'm still marvel at.
Yeah.
He's been dead for 40 years, 41 years. But I appreciate what he was about and his approach, even more and more each year. I don't get tired of it. I've become more entranced with it as the years go on. Yeah.
Did you struggle to understand him? You know, from the videos and stuff I've seen, I've watched old VHS videos of him as well. Was it at that time when you met him, when I know he had lost his teeth and struggling with his tongue because of polio and stuff like that? Was he hard to understand?
No.
No.
No, I thought it was easy to understand. But I think that some people complained that he was hard to understand. Well, I think that's an emotion. I think that I was very responsive to his presence. So, no, I seem to pick up what he was talking about. It made perfect sense to me. Yeah.
So that was the first time you met him, and then you spent more time with him. Was that correct? And you actually did some teaching with him?
Not some teaching. The next year, that was 78, I was there for another couple of weeks. And there was a group then each day, usually half a dozen or 10 people. And I went the third time in early 1980. I was there just for a week. And I said goodbye to him on the Friday, and he died 10 days later. So he was working up to he had another teaching seminar the following week.
Wow. He worked right to the end.
Right to the end. And he finished that next week on the Friday, and he collapsed on the Saturday and died on the Tuesday. But, Jeff Zeig said that when he was dying, he got his family to tell him jokes.
Wow.
He was a remarkable man. He was not. He was someone who, I was going to say, walked the walk, but he wheelchaired the wheelchair. He didn't. He didn't just walk the talk, you know.
Yeah, because he used a lot of hypnosis for his own pain control and stuff. Correct.
He did.
Yeah.
And with his clients, when he was doing clinical work, he used formal hypnosis in only about a third of his cases.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you were around him, there was always some kind of fuzziness. You weren't quite sure what was going on. Everyone in the room knew that he was talking directly to him, to them. So he had a way of speaking generally that most people could kind of connect with, particularly individually.
How would you summarize his approach to hypnosis?
Well, I would say that there are certain fundamental principles of his approach. One is people are individuals. He said that to think there could be one theory or approach that would be relevant for all people of both sexes, of all ages, of all ethnic backgrounds is ridiculous.
Wow.
Margaret said that she thought that he invented a new theory for each individual person.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
But I don't think so. I don't think he invented a theory at all. I think he listened to the theory that each individual person was working from. He entered that and then started to play. So there was that individuality that he emphasized. And the other, as I mentioned before, was learning. That problems are learned, solutions can be learned. And the other fascinating principle that's at the core of his work, his approach, was the principle of utilization. He said you take whatever a client brings and you make use of it. For example, if someone comes to see me and they say, I want to stop smoking, I'm addicted to alcohol, I'm addicted to nicotine, then if someone can be addicted to nicotine, they can become addicted to breathing fresh air. So if they bring addiction, we'll use it. We'll just redirect it into some more useful way. So I think his idea of utilization, making use of, co-opting whatever anyone brings, it means that it's a respectful utilization of who the person is, rather than trying to impose or treat or fix. You probably know that classical story of when Erickson was working in a mental hospital. There was a bloke who said he was Jesus Christ. He was walking around with a sheet wrapped around him, trying to convert everybody to Christianity. Anyone who tried to cure him was actually an angel, was an agent of the devil trying to stop him from doing his father's work. Erickson went up to him and he said, I believe you've had some experience in carpentry.
Right.
So
utilizing what he gave. Yeah.
Well, he went down to the woodworking shop and started to interact with other people, started to join in with the consensual reality, and there you go.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah.
There was a woman who had migraine and wanted hypnosis, and Erickson said to her, make sure that you don't get rid of migraine completely, because there are some family gatherings that having a migraine is the only excuse.
I love that. I love that. A very playful approach.
He was very
what could be serious problems.
Oh yeah. Well, he said that the people have enough problem with the grimness of their problem without having to put up with grim therapy as well.
Right.
No, he entertained himself, and he was fun to be around.
Yeah.
And,
what type of clients was he seeing typically?
No, there was no typical. He with young kids, with couples, with old people. And the only time that I was with him to see a client, he invited me to sit in with the client. But when I met him, he'd pretty well stopped his practice and was just teaching. But this woman said that she had a flying phobia. And he asked her to describe it, and she described the things that we all know about. The closer I get to the plane, the more frightened I get, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, this is a flying phobia. And then he said to her, no, you don't have a flying phobia. And I thought, what? He said, what you've got is a fear of losing control,
right,
and a socially accepted way of expressing that. He just redefined a flying phobia. Then
Wow.
when she was trying to make sense of that, he said, do you know, in your life, you have overlooked a lot of comfort. You know, what we experience depends on how we direct our attention. She
Right.
looked at, you can't, that's a truism. You can't say, no, I haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So then when she was trying to cope with this, he turned to me, talk about playful. He said to me, do you think she's attractive?
Really? Wow.
So he was very playful.
Mm.
So now, I don't know whether he saw her again. I don't know whether that helped.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that it cured her, but I can't be sure. But I'm just giving that as an example.
Yeah. That really summarizes his personality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So was this around when you got to meet him? Was this around the time of NLP being created and Richard Bandler and John Grinder interviewing? Were you around that time?
I'm not sure when that happened. I think that might have been a little bit earlier. I've not been an NLP fan, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I know about it, know something
Mm-hmm.
of it. But I think my understanding is that was a little bit in the middle 70s or early 70s.
You
I'm
might
not
be
sure.
right. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
sure. Not sure, Scott.
Yeah. So with your experience, it's probably a great question. How did you change as a hypnotherapist? Did your way of using therapy with clients totally change, or do you think you just had more things to rely on? Or
Totally. It flipped it. Because before I met him, I had to be the expert. I had to know. I had to direct the therapy.
mm-hmm.
I was the expert who had the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
After Erickson, I recognized that the client is the expert. They've got the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And my job was just to help them to reconnect with the knowledge that they didn't know that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, like I said, when I was in general practice, I delivered a lot of babies. But
Mm-hmm.
I've never been pregnant, and I'm not likely to be. So my job in delivering the babies was to help a woman allow the natural process of childbirth to happen naturally and effortlessly without me having to direct it. I mean, if I could.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. We couldn't be an expert in that. Yeah.
No, you and I couldn't.
Mm.
Yeah.
So outside of that's what I was always been curious about. Outside of becoming a better therapist, did what you learned from Milton Erickson, did that change you as a person, like the way you looked at the world and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lesson in humility. Instead of being arrogant and an expert, when I first started, someone would come to see me and they'd say, I've been to see a lot of therapists and none of them have been able to help. And I would think, oh, yeah, ripper. I can strut my stuff and I can show them how good I am. And generally, I got a pretty quick lesson in humility. I was just another reason why they didn't get better. But after Erickson, it was like I've been to a lot of other people. So I could say something like, well, they didn't help you. You must already be losing faith in my ability to help you. Where did you get the idea that I could be someone to help you? And I don't know whether I can or not. I know that you'll do the best you can and I'll do the best I can. But let's find out. And I promise that I'll do what I can to be useful. In other words, instead of me working on someone, it was a process of exploring with someone. It was totally, like I say, it flipped it on its head. It completely reversed the power tactics.
Did you get more success with your clients?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And it was certainly more satisfying for me.
Right.
And it was actually a relief because, if anyone pretends to be an expert, it's a pretty dangerous claim, Harry Palmer from Avatar says sometimes it feels like he's just jumped off a 100-story building.
Mm-hmm.
There's 99, 98, 97. I'm doing all right so far.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we pretend that we are an expert, an all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful person, we're
Mm-hmm.
asking for a comeuppance.
Yeah.
Asking for guarantee.
It's always so interesting to watch Milton Erickson stuff and hear people talk about and try and summarize his techniques and try and work out exactly what he's doing and put the emphasis on it's the word, it's the way he's looking, it's the voice, his tone. It looks like an impossible task to really pin down what he was doing.
Well, do you know how many Ericksonian therapists it takes to change a light globe?
Yeah.
It takes 19.
Mm-hmm.
1 to change the light globe,
Mm-hmm.
and 18 to say how they think Erickson would have done it differently.
Wow. That's true.
If you look at the books that have been written about Erickson, Sid Rosen wrote that beautiful book, My Voice Will Go With You, the teaching type.
Mm-hmm.
Sid was interested in stories.
Mm-hmm.
NLP guys looked at transderivational grammar through Chomsky, and they came up with NLP, deletion, generalizations, and so on. Ernie Rossi had a background in Jungian analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So he was interested in the intrapsychic, archetypical,
Mm.
that one where people writing about Erickson, you discover that what they write says more about them than about Erickson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was a beautiful documentary that Jay Haley and Madeline Rishaport made back in, I don't remember when. And there was a cute little interview with Erickson by a psychologist. And this psychologist said, what is hypnosis, Dr. Erickson?
Mm-hmm.
Erickson said, in hypnosis, you get your client to focus on what's useful and beneficial to them.
Mm-hmm.
You're wearing black shoes. You don't need to think about that. You're wearing a tie. You can forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
You've been listening to me or letting your mind wander.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't give him a definition of hypnosis. He gave the interviewer an experience of hypnosis.
Because we can't forget the experience, right?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
And I think that's probably why it's so vivid in your mind as well. We've probably told these stories a lot, but I assume it'd be very vivid in your mind still. Your time with them anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, Jay Haley said that he was glad he was basically a benign person. But on that first time I was with him, back in that March in 77, on the Wednesday, Lee wasn't there. I was just there with Erickson by myself, just the two of us.
Mm-hmm. And
I was tongue-tied and self-conscious. I'd travel halfway around the world to see this magical guru. I was thinking, what am I going to say? I don't know. So I was tongue-tied, and he was not slightly helpful.
Right.
He looked around, waited for me, and the more silent and unhelpful he was, the more self-conscious and paralyzed I became.
Mm-hmm.
And after, I think it was probably about 10 minutes, it felt like 2 hours, but after a short time, he picked up the phone and said to his wife, take me inside. And he dismissed me for the day.
Wow.
If I wasn't going to take the first step, forget it.
And he wasn't going to eat.
He was not a helpful person.
Right.
Not
but you obviously learned something from it.
Yeah. The next day I had some questions.
Yeah. Think long and hard. Yeah. Yeah.
And, on the second week, he said to me, I want you to go to the Phoenix Botanical Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, I'm not here as a tourist. I'm not going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, he said, did you get to go to the Phoenix Botanical Gardens? I said, I told you, I'm not going. We've got beautiful gardens I've been to botanical gardens in Melbourne and Adelaide. I know what botanical. Okay. Wednesday, did you get to go to the botanical gardens yet? And I'm thinking, I told you I'm not going. Okay. Thursday, he said, when you go to the botanical gardens, I want you to look out for the boojum tree.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see the boojum tree, you will know that it's a boojum tree because it's like no other tree you've ever seen. So Friday was to be my last day there. So guess where I went at the end of the day, Thursday?
Yeah.
And I got there. It was a very difficult place to get to, but I got there and I went into the botanical gardens, and it was the size of about 2 suburban blocks, and it was full of cactus plants.
Right.
It was a desert botanical garden. I knew what botanical gardens were like. No.
Yeah. This wasn't it.
Always messing with rigidities, always. And I'm wandering around there. I don't particularly like cactus plants, but they're fascinating. And I saw this thing, and I thought, oh my God, that has to be the boojum tree. It didn't have a label. So I went and found the curator who was about to close for the day. And I said, have you got a minute? Come and have a look. Is that the boojum tree? Yeah, it's the boojum tree. It was like no other tree I'd ever seen. And it was a boojum tree.
Fantastic.
With no other comment about the boojum tree than that. If you went to the Phoenix Botanical Garden, you would recognize the boojum tree.
And he got you there.
He got me there. He was persistent, so persistent. Eventually, I just gave in, you know. He just nagged me into it.
Was that so you become more compliant to his, and I hate to use the word teaching because it's really not, that's what I'm learning. Was that to become more compliant to his indirect way to communicate you and help you learn, do you think?
I wouldn't call that, have you been to the Botanical Gardens yet? I wouldn't call it indirect. Maybe when you go there, maybe that was indirect.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that Erickson's approach was indirect.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't think it was indirect at all.
Okay. How would you explain it?
I think he was indirect if that was going to be helpful.
Okay.
But if it was going to be helpful to be direct, on my second visit there, like I mentioned, my first marriage was in crisis. And I told him that this is what was going on. And he listened. And then he looked me in the eye and he said, your marriage is finished. Now, I wouldn't call that indirect.
No, that's very direct. That's very direct. Yeah.
Marriage is finished. I said, I feel like I've been kicked in the head. But that's exactly what I needed. I've been equivocating. Should I go? Should I leave? Should I go? It's finished. So, you know, the first time he said, stay in general practice. That was direct.
Yeah.
And I did the opposite. The second time he said, your marriage is finished. And I realized that was the fact. So I left the marriage.
Wow.
So that was not indirect. Sometimes he was as indirect as a sledgehammer.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. But it's what the client needs at the time.
For what was missing for them. If they need a kick, you get a kick. If they need a constraint, you get a constraint.
Wow.
You need an indirect approach, he'd tell you stories. You know, that first day, 2.5 hours of stories. He didn't give any direct suggestions, so-called, as at any stage. And I get fussy about language, Scott. Most people, when they talk about hypnosis, they talk about inductions.
That was my next question to you, actually. Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that's a good word. Induction in hypnosis derives from the fact that hypnosis and general anesthetics became popular about the same time. So you induce an anesthetic. You want someone to go deeper. You want them to become unconscious. You want them to not move, not talk. So I prefer to think of it as an invitation.
Interesting.
If you invite someone, then they can. You know, you invited me for this interview. You didn't suggest it. You didn't.
That's right.
No induction, just an invitation.
Yeah.
And there's a popular idea, which I again think is a misconception, that hypnosis makes someone passive so they're more responsive to suggestions. I think that's
Yeah.
absolute nonsense.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think it's got anything to do with suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
All we can do is offer invitations.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Yapko puts it so beautifully. He says that, in his view, too often stories are left like unwanted babies on the doorstep of the unconscious, hoping to be taken in.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a couple who want a baby and
Mm-hmm.
someone leaves a baby on the doorstep, they'll take it in. So if there is an invitation that meets what's missing for a client, they'll accept the invitation. But no one's suggesting anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Erickson also, I heard that from him, that he didn't
Mm-hmm.
think it had anything to do with suggestion.
Right. Wow. You know, a lot of people are going to watch this, and this is going to totally flip them on their head, Rob. I hope you understand that.
Well, I'm just expressing my opinion. That's. I'm not saying I'm right.
Mm-hmm. But it makes a lot of sense.
Does it?
Yeah.
Well, it does to me. That's why I believe it. But
So for interesting question, like for people, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. Had you not had any experience in hypnosis and had met Milton Erickson right at the very start of getting your interest in hypnosis, do you think it would have had just as profound effect as it did, or do you think your experience helped?
No, it would have been easier, because I had to unlearn all of the kind of rigidity that I'd learned, so then I could start to be flexible. But if I was ignorant, and I find that people who do some training with me, if someone has got no experience at all, but if they've had an experience of interior design or cooking or landscape gardening, I think, here we go, this is going to be easy.
Yeah.
If someone comes and they've been a psychiatrist or a psychologist for 20 or 30 years, I start to sweat.
Because they're stuck in that model.
So much unlearning
Mm-hmm.
to get through, so that there's enough space
Mm-hmm.
for learning to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Getting back to zero, getting back to nothing, that's when we could learn. If we already know something, that's going to impede our learning.
Yeah. Do you find there's a lot of resistance when someone, obviously there is, when they're caught in the old models that aren't serving them, when you're trying to teach them something new?
Well, I think resistance is another funny thing. The harder we push against something, the more resistant it becomes. If I push this wall behind me, it gets very resistant. If I just leave it, it's not slightly resistant. So I prefer to think that there's no resistant clients, just resistant therapists.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what if I think, I'm not saying that's even correct, but if I start from the position that this client is resistant or this student is resistant, then that's going to be a cop-out for me. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and if they don't get it, they're resistant. Something wrong with them. But if I catch myself thinking, oh, I'm being resistant here, then I have a chance to be flexible and somehow get around it, be indirect, really.
So how do you teach this to your therapy students? Because if you look at the traditional Ericksonian type training, it's heavily based around language patterns, modeling, all of that sort of stuff. How do you teach the experience you had with Milton Erickson to your new students?
Well, I do like to start with a structure. I often, let's do this, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then with a qualifier, this is just something to start with, and the sooner you throw it away, the better. But I think that people learn best through experience.
Yeah.
And so early on in teaching people and introducing people, providing an opportunity for them to learn, I like them to do a demonstration. And then in that very first session, get them to practice with each other, to start to play with the principle. And in general, I've found that with anyone wanting to learn this, or with clients too, if we start with what you like to do, And then we think of hypnosis as a function of focus and absorption, like reading a book or watching a movie or doing something like that. Nothing weird, nothing special. We can say, what do you like to do? For example, if I were to ask you, Scott, what do you like to do? What sorts of things are fun for you? What sort of things do you like to do?
Me, I enjoy business. That's my passion.
Okay. So what do you like about business?
Helping people.
Okay. So let's just imagine. So I'm not going to do this now, but just say you wanted to experience some hypnosis. Then I could say to you, how about you remember a time when you were helping someone, helping people, there's someone you're helping, and you're in the business of helping someone, and to get focused and get absorbed in that, who's going to be resistant to an invitation to get in touch with something that you like to do?
That they enjoy. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people take to that pretty easily.
So what would your students, they're coming to see you to improve the way they do hypnotherapy and hypnosis, or they just want to learn from scratch, or they just want to learn from you? Because, a bit of everything.
Sometimes, yeah.
And they're obviously asking a lot about your Milton Erickson experience, your stories and stuff like that. Yeah, and you use that as an opportunity to teach?
Yeah, some people are interested. Some people are not interested in Erickson. They just want to know how to do what they want to do. That's it varies.
Yeah. So looking back on your experience with him, what was your favorite moment, do you think?
Oh, there've been so many of them.
Yeah.
For me, if I look at all the favorite moments that I've experienced over the 45 years or so that I've been doing this and teaching it, like you said, helping someone, contributing to someone. When you see someone suffering, and then you have a conversation with them, and like the light goes on, the sun comes out. Having the experience of being a witness and of being able to facilitate that process of someone becoming a fuller expression of who they are, they're my favorite moments there.
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So for people, I guess we're going to get a lot of therapists and coaches watching this. What advice would you have for them to improve? I don't know how broad a question this is, to become better hypnotherapists and become better at helping people. What piece of advice would you have for them?
The first bit of advice is that never take any notice of any advice that anyone gives you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I think that anyone wanting to learn hypnosis needs to find someone that they can learn from.
Yeah.
Some people want to have a ritual that they can practice and then vary from. Some people like to start with telling stories and then be vague and then get some direction. But I think we've all got different learning styles.
Yeah.
So you want to find someone that you can trust, someone that you can learn with, someone that fits your style of learning. And also, I think that if you want to learn, you should learn from more than one person.
Interesting.
Oh, yes.
I like that.
Michael Yapko, for example, I've known Michael for 40 years. I would say he was a good friend. And I disagree with nearly everything that he says.
Wow.
And he disagrees with nearly everything that I say.
Gotcha.
So I think that people learn from me and they learn from Michael, even though we've got very different perspectives. He's got a great sense of humour. One time I was talking with him in Melbourne and he said, Rob, people love doing the programs that you teach, but you just have more content. And I said, Michael, people love learning from you on the programs that you teach, but you've just got too much content.
Yeah.
And we both, so there's different styles, and it doesn't have to be one.
Yeah.
I think we can. There's some marvelous therapists out there, marvelous teachers, marvelous facilitators, marvelous.
So, are you just teaching now? Do you see clients as well, Rob?
No, I haven't seen clients for about 15 years. I've just been teaching.
Yeah.
And of
Just all
course, because of the pandemic, all my teaching is online pretty well.
Yeah. How does that go for you? Was it a big change?
I love it. No, I'd been doing it for about 5 years before I had to.
Oh, perfect.
I had a call this morning, and there was someone from Hobart, where I live. There was someone from Minnesota, someone from Japan. The people all over. Someone from Britain. It's just extraordinary whether the way people can interact and learn together very from very distant and disparate places. The one thing that I've noticed in teaching in groups is that therapists live an isolated existence. And what's so fundamentally helpful is if we can find a group of people where, I say to people in my programs, you don't have to pretend to be sane. You don't have to pretend to be normal. We're all mad here. You'd have to be mad to be someone in Paris sitting up at 2 a.m. to be part of a program. You got to be crazy.
Yeah, that's not normal. Yeah.
For me to get on a plane and fly to Phoenix just to sit with an old man in purple pajamas, that's insane.
Yeah.
Should be more of it.
Yeah, I agree. Now, looking at the industry where it's going, like what big changes have you seen? Because you've seen it all, really, from the cycles that seems the industry goes through.
Yeah, I don't know. I noticed that there are always cycles. There are always fashions.
Yeah.
EMDR was the thing. The latest fashion is rewind. There's always something. We had TFT. Once the alphabets come out, I think,
Do you see a bit of Milton Erickson strategies and all these new cycles and fashions? Yeah.
And it saddens me that often people don't see the root of this. They don't recognize it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not. I don't like the way the world is going. It's been in the world of therapy. It's being run by bureaucrats who want to try and standardize things. And you can standardize the approach if you can standardize the people. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
So all I'm doing is I'm trying to be a little island of insanity in a sane world, or sanity in an insane world, whatever. Just trying to be, and to link up with other people who have got. There is a bunch of people scattered throughout the globe. Birgit Vala in Norway, Scott Miller, Michael Yapko, Stephen Gilligan, Jeffrey Zeig. There are people all over the place, and they're brave enough or stupid enough to actually stick with this principle of being respectful to a person and responsive to a person, rather than training them into being a particular way. There's a bunch of people like that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because it's try to standardize a therapeutic approach when we all know people are so different is an impossible task.
Well, at the first international conference, Erickson was quoted as saying, I don't know whether you know about Procrustes.
No.
He was a mythical Greek robber who insisted that when he'd robbed you, you had to stay the night, sleep on a particular bed, and fit the bed. And if you were too tall, he'd cut your feet off. If they were too short, he'd put you on the rack and stretch you. That was
Yeah.
Erickson said, because people are individuals, we need to tailor our approach to meet individual needs rather than tailoring the individual to fit some hypothetical Procrustean bed of psychological theory.
Wow.
So that's what informs me in my approach.
Yeah. And it keeps you passionate about doing it your way too, or the way that you know best.
The way that I know is most useful.
Right.
Because when I first started, I knew best.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yes.
it's just wrong.
Yes.
Wrong.
Had you not had, probably the last question for you, had you not had that experience with Milton Erickson, do you think you would have still doing the old traditional way that you were sort of, like you said, you were sort of stuck in? You would have stayed with that?
Probably.
Mm.
And I would have got as bored as hell.
Yeah. 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 I like that playful approach. And even, for the small times I got to see Milton Erickson just on VHS and, some DVDs and stuff now, it's just such a, uncanny is the wrong word, but just such a different approach than what you see now, which is very traditional, very strict technique, script, follow this language pattern. In comparison to someone like that, it's just mind-boggling what he did.
It is mind-boggling until you realize that all he did was he listened
Mm-hmm.
for what was useful, and that's what he did. That's what he provided. It's not that complicated.
No.
I mentioned Birgit Vala in Norway, and she heads an agency there called the Helping Place. And when someone comes, they don't use diagnostic labels, they don't have appointments. Someone arrives and someone sees them and they say, "What do you want?"
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. What do you want? And then they do what they can to provide that. And they have people with psychotic breakdowns, and they come out of it no schizophrenia, almost no drugs, almost no long-term compliance, simply by asking, "What do you want?"
Mm-hmm.
I like to ask, "What's missing?"
Yeah.
So if we find out what's missing and we find a way of providing that, then someone's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually not complicated. It's very, very simple. A lot simpler than some kind of protocol. Protocols are complicated.
Yeah, yeah. And trying to match it to everybody is impossible.
Well, you need to get the rack and the chainsaw.
Yeah. And get them to fit your standard. I agree with that. Well, Rob, that was amazing. That was such a unique glimpse, and I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. I've followed what you've done. I'm a big fan of Milton Erickson as well. For anyone that is interested in maybe learning with you, Rob, and your style and what you do, where could people contact you? I see you've got a website and things like that. Where are you most active?
Well, that's probably the best place to start. It's www.cet.net.au.
Awesome. Excellent.
And so always a pleasure to share this approach with anyone who's interested to learn.
Yeah, well, we're going to get this video up on our YouTube channel. Guys, for anyone watching this, I'll leave that link below. If you do want to get in contact with Rob, I could sit here honestly all day, Rob, and listen to these stories. These are incredible. This is something that I've wanted to hear personally for myself. And I really hope everybody watching this gets a lot out of this. Rob, thank you so much. That was so cool.
Thanks for the invitation, Scott. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Rob. I'm glad we got to invite you, which was a great thing.
Yeah, okay.
Excellent, Rob. Thank you so much. Guys, look forward to seeing you on our next interview. Like I said, I'll leave that link below to go check out Rob's work. Contact Rob if you're interested. And thank you again, Rob.